Hey guys, this is Anthony Terrell on YouTube. This could be a long video, and it's not planned out because I barely have time to make it. Never mind, do 10 takes to get it perfect. But here we have my disclaimer and all my stickers, which are actually not that many. It's my Dark Arts lockpicking mug, but which I actually want to use now. But the video, as you may guess from the title, is about tubular locks and picking tubular locks with a tubular lock pick. So now that I've gotten this whole disclaimer thing out of the way, I might clear it out entirely. And so the issue is I actually bought something. For the sake of simplicity, let's say I bought a washer and dryer. I do now own a washer and dryer. I bought something and the washer and dryer were included with it, and so I got a set of keys, and all of the keys work except for one, which includes the key to a tubular lock. I could pay someone, a locksmith, to basically rekey it or replace the lock or whatever, but since I have an interest in lockpicking anyway, and I do in fact own the lock, it's not this lock, it's another lock, but I thought it would be a great excuse or a great reason to learn how to do tubular lockpicking. I actually got this Ace tubular lockpick thingy about, almost a year ago. I bought the set of them, the Southord 7 and 8 pin, which I subsequently found out that 8-pin tubular locks are very rare, so maybe I just should have stuck with the 7. But anyway, yeah, so I got these like last summer, right before I went to Quebec, and yeah, so anyway, I have this problem and I want to solve it rather than just calling someone and getting them to solve it for me. I thought I would try to learn how to pick tubular locks to solve the problem today, and also learn how to do things in the future. So it's been a while since I made a video, so I'm relearning this and lighting and whatnot. So all right, so Bosnian Bill has a video where he talks about how to use the tubular lockpick, and basically what he says is, I'm gonna get rid of this for now because it impedes my explanation. Basically what he says is, all right, so a tubular lock, basically the pins come forward. I have a great example I can talk about. So rather than a pin tumbler lock where the pins sort of go through the cylinder and prevent you from turning it, in a tubular lock the pins actually push forward, like so. Basically what the key does is it actually pushes the pins away from you at the right level for each pin to reach the shear line, and then allows you to turn the whole lock. It's not, I have a friend of mine said, oh, those are really secure locks. I don't think they're especially secure, but they are different, and if you were to pick each pin, as you can see in other YouTube videos, you'd have to pick it, basically as you start to turn it, it'll lock up again with the next set of pins, so you have to pick it multiple times if you want to rotate it completely. This is from the Visual Guide to Lockpicking, which I bought like last year in some other order and didn't crack at all until it came in handy for this thing. So here's another explanation. So basically the pins get pushed out, and the key has these little ridges, and let's see, probably can't, you may or may not be able to see them, but basically each of these little things is like half of a pin, and they're at different heights. So this is like kind of deep, and then that's very shallow. And if you're familiar with pin tumbler locks, this probably is starting to sound familiar, deep and shallow, and different pins get lifted, or in this case pushed, to different heights until they reach the shear line, and the whole thing lines up and allows you to turn. So yeah, and so that's that. And so basically I'm recording this video, and I have a feeling it might be kind of long because I'm trying to record everything that I learned before it drains out of my brain. So I got this last summer and sat in a box, and now finally had a use for it. Was very excited, and basically I said, all right, well, let me see what all the YouTube gurus have to say. So I found not that many on actually using a tubular lock pick, which is really actually an impressioning tool, but we'll just call it a pick for argument's sake. And anyway, so there were a handful of videos, probably like 7 or 8, and Bosnian Bill, who I generally love his videos, his explanations are great, and yeah, so I'm generally a big fan of his stuff, and so there's a few of them, and basically what he says in, I'll try to link it from this video, what he says is that the way that you do it is, so each of these things is basically pushes one of those pins forward. And I don't, I'll take it out of the vise. I can't help myself because I just want to show what's going on here. So I don't know if you can see, but you see the little, you can actually see the pins around in a little circle around there. And so basically what that key is doing is that key is pushing each of those pins to different levels till it reaches the individual shear line for that pin. They all get lined up correctly and the whole thing can turn. I just wanted to show you the pins. I'm going to put this back in the old vise now. Just going to put that so the little notch is up. So part of why I'm making this video is that I got conflicting advice, and I'll get it. So basically, what Bosnian Bill said is, he said, well, all right, so I have to get into how this works. So basically, I'm going to loosen this up now. God help me. And so each of these things corresponds to a pin. Each of these little, I guess I'm going to call them tines, like tines of a fork. I don't think I've ever seen anyone else use that terminology, but that's the terminology I'm using. So each of these basically corresponds, so here's like the push and pull, and corresponds over up here. So I'm going to push this one all the way out. Let me get that closer. So I'm going to push this all the way out. Let me try to focus here. Maybe focus? Yeah, focus. So see how that went up? And basically you can do that all the way around. I'm going to push them all out all the way. So mistake number 1 that I made was I wasn't paying quite close attention, and I started off putting them all as far out as they could go. And then I started to try to shove it into the lock. I don't know that that was fatal, but it wasn't really what you're supposed to do. When I failed miserably, I've been working on this for like a week and a half or so, frustratingly, until I finally got it tonight. But basically, what all the videos do suggest, and I missed this the first time when I wasn't paying attention, is that you should zero it, but not like this where they're all pushed out all the way. You actually want to zero them at the level, so like that. See how it's like they've all the tines have been pushed down to basically kind of like what you might think of as like the base level of the tubular pick. So what they all show, so I'm going to push them back out the way they're not supposed to be. So this washer comes in handy for doing them all at the same level. All right, so then basically what all the video shows, you basically kind of like get them level by pushing straight down like that. So that does what I just did with my finger. It brings them all down to that level. Now, I will say that when I got this, so these are dark. I actually took a Sharpie to these because it made it a lot easier to look at and to understand what was going on. And I'm sure they don't do it because making the tines black would be, more expensive, and I don't know. I guess it's not really necessary. But for me to understand what was going on, and especially later for decoding, it was kind of good, and I do recommend it. The other thing I did is this little notch, I forget what Bosnian Bill called it, but this little notch here lines up with the, well, you can see it matches the same thing on the key, this little notch here, and that sort of lets you know how to put it in the lock. So anyway, I put a little arrow on that because you know, it's like silver on silver, and that's what I was saying where the tines being black would help. So, you know, kind of trying to figure out what's going on is a little tough when everything is like one giant blob of silver. So I actually took the Sharpie and kind of drew, basically I just kind of wanted to show visually like, okay, where is that darn notch? So yeah, so that's what I did with that. It's kind of gotten rubbed away a little bit, but whatever, I did it. I mean, I could have looked down here, that also helps, but I like to kind of see the progression up all the way. And I was kind of afraid I was putting it in a little off and that was messing with my results, and maybe that was why it wasn't working. Anyway, so what Bosnian Bill says is, he says what you want to do, this thing, which basically makes it tougher for these times to go up and down. So basically what he says is you want to zero this out. So you put it all down, you kind of press against the table, make sure they're all level. And then what he says is you add some resistance. So you tighten this up. Now what he says in his video, actually a few different videos of his, is he says tighten it till, basically it's very loose now, loose, and then you tighten it until it starts to go, and then you do a nudge. I think that's what the technical term that he used was, the nudge. You do a little nudge more, and don't over tighten it. He said the mistake a lot of guys make is they over tighten it. So you don't want to over tighten it, because then your tines or your whatever they are, pins, they're not really pins, but these things feelers, I think they're sometimes called, they won't move. And so basically what's happening is when you press this into the lock, you are trying to, you're actually really impressioning it. So basically each pin will push forward, and if you're also turning at the same time, what you're hoping to do is you're hoping to catch it at the shear line. And so basically each pin, just like all impressioning attacks, it's kind of using the design of the lock against it. It's kind of like lock judo. In the sense that the whole design of the lock has springs that push outward, so you're using each pin's spring, or the pin stack, to try to get it to the shear line, and you're hoping that they'll all kind of get to the shear line at once. It sounds a little ridiculous, like why would that work, but it does work, or it can work. So basically this, I said earlier, this is not really a tubular pick in that sense. But yeah, so it's more like a tubular impressioning tool, but for the sake of selling stuff and referring to it casually, we'll just call it a tubular pick. So this little notch is what I was talking about, where you get a line the notch up here, that little thing, you can line that up with that, which is the same thing with the key and that notch. So I'll just show you the key. There we go. Not surprising, it works. So this particular tubular lock, I'm trying to remember, I think I got it from Southord when I ordered something else recently. I ordered the pen pick or something. They had a sale. So I figured, why not? I want to solve this problem with the tubular lock, so great. All right, so the key point I was getting at is that, I told you this video is going to be long. Bosnian Bill said you tighten it up just till it starts to tighten, and then a nudge more, and you push it in, and you basically wiggle it back and forth, and that's kind of like, it's very similar to some of those other videos that you might have seen where you use a pen cap to impression a bike lock. That the pins will push against the plastic and basically get to the shear line and pop it open. It's a very similar kind of concept. So I did that. So I did exactly what Bosnian Bill suggested. I put, the point is you got to push straight into the lock. It's got to be kind of perpendicular, and you don't want to go at an angle because you want the force from the pin to be equal on all these feelers or these tines. And then so you push in all the way back, and then you go left and right, left and right, left and right, left and right. And basically what Bosnian Bill says is if it doesn't work after 20 or so times, then give up and reset it and then try again. So this wasn't working. So I basically did what he said. All right, we'll reset it. Great, okay, so loosen it up. Let's say loosen it up, push it all the way down. And I actually have an idea about pushing it all the way down that I will share later. Can't even see if this is on camera. Okay, yeah, so push it all the way down. Then I'm going to 0, Looks pretty even to me. So now I'm going to tighten it up to just where it starts to catch, and then a nudge more. This is Boston Bill's recommendation, and okay, let's try again. Let's see if it works. So find a little notchy thing, and we go in, and gee, this isn't working. Well, all right, so I did about a week of this off and on as the mood struck me and failed. So anyone who has experience with this may have seen, gee, you know what happened was I pushed this in, they all went all the way back. Well, that shouldn't be what happens, because the whole point of this impressioning is basically these things should end up at different levels, matching the different levels of these notches in the key. Some will be high, some will be low, generally speaking. So why are they all getting at the same level? Okay, well, I can only bang my head against the wall doing the exact same thing for so long before I say this isn't working. This is the abyss of hopelessness or something like that, the trough of despair. Basically, where I was like, I wasted my money, this is never going to work, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, no, there's got to be a different way to do this. So at this point, I took the Visual Guide to Lockpicking, which, I don't know, seems like an okay book. Whatever, I got it like last year, and much like way too many books on my shelf, didn't even crack it. Well, finally I said, you know what, let me check this thing out. So I was actually pleasantly surprised that it had a whole section, not only on tubular locks, which I kind of expected, but it also had basically this tool, or a variation of it. So it's calling them feelers, or levers, and basically had some interesting ways. So it says insert straight into lock all the way back, which makes sense. It pushed them against the flat surface. We did that. That's what I was calling zeroing them out. If you tilt the pick, you'll be unsuccessful. You got to put them all at the same level of force all the way around. Keep it lined up with the lock throughout the entire procedure. So basically all the stuff matched Bosnian Bill. So one thing that was interesting here was that they have this thing that says slide in and out while applying torque. Well, that's interesting, because Bosnian Bill didn't say anything about sliding in and out. That's not to say that he's wrong, but to basically say there's not necessarily one true way of doing this. There may be room for variation, which gave me a little bit of hope, because I was doing exactly what he said, and it wasn't working. So the idea that there could be different methods of trying this gave me a little bit of hope. So that, and it also had something about rubber bands, and I didn't want to get into rubber bands. So basically, as a way to make it even harder for the feelers or the tines to move up and down. I would have gone there if I had to, but I just don't want to muck around with rubber bands, although I understand why they're there. So this is interesting. It says test the various spring strengths. Well, my lock picks are on the other side of my living space here, and I don't feel like going to get them, but I did use a diamond pick to test some of the springs, and I thought that they were kind of strong, but this is the one and only tubular lock that I own, other than the one in the washer dryer, which is not in my living space. It's the one and only tubular lock that I have easy access to. So, I guess it seems strong, but what do I have to compare it to? I don't know. They seem strong, but who knows? But that was interesting, testing the string strength. That comes into play later. So basically, the key phrase here is tightening or loosening the resistance of the feelers will be needed, depending on the spring strengths. So that was very interesting. The reason I didn't get into single pin picking this, which I will do at some point, is I actually want to make a key for the lock on the washer dryer. So if I could individually single pin pick it, in addition to having to do it like 5 or 6 times, I would basically also not have the levels for the pins to cut a key. So that wouldn't really accomplish my long-term goal. So basically the rest of this yada yada. It's interesting, but the key takeaway for me was the idea that there were different ways to do it, and also the concept of the spring strength. So I hunted around on YouTube a little bit more and found some. I found a few other videos which use slight variations, not the exact same Southord tool, but some other ones. As you can see, the one in the visual guide to lockpicking was a similar tool, but not exactly the same design. Now I put my bookmark away, so I don't know exactly where it was. But basically, it was, there are a few different tools of this general design. There it is. So you can see that the feelers here, those little curves are not present on mine. On the Southord one, they stick out and kind of curve down. So there are YouTube videos with slightly different tools, and I was fortunate enough to find one that basically, what it recommended instead was it said zero it out, so we'll do that. We'll zero it out. And then what it actually said, which was very interesting, was it said, instead of what Bosnian Bill said, where you tighten it a little bit and then a nudge more, which he was very emphatic about. Basically, this video, which I will link to as well, said when you get to this point, tighten it the F up. Just tighten it, tighten it, tighten it. Not completely tight, but like, whereas Bosnian Bill would say like maybe 50%, 55%, this guy was saying like go 95%. Like, and then what he actually said was you push it in, you go all the way back, and then as you're in the lock all the way back, you slightly loosen it as you wiggle it. So you got all the way back, now you're loosening it a little bit while you try to turn it, and you're giving these a little bit more permission to move. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because when I was doing it Bosnian Bill's way, these things were all getting pushed all the way back. Like, if this is 0, if we're at 0 now, I'm pretty sure we just zeroed it out, but we'll do it again. If this is 0, well, you know what? Bosnian Bill's method, tighten it up, and then a nudge. What's happening here? Well, what's happening, let's watch. Well, look, they all moved, like, pretty much all the way back. That is, and I could sit there and do this for 30 times, but, they're not exactly the same level, but they're pretty much, I don't know how far back this is supposed to go, but if they started out at 0, I would say these are all probably 9 or whatever the highest level is. Like, there's not a lot of variation here, which to me doesn't bear any relationship to what I actually know the key to be, which we're trying to get, where you have some low, a high, a medium, a super high, a low, and low. Like, there's variation there, but there's no variation here. So the other video that I found that said tighten the thing like a lot, like 95%, like I was saying, that kind of made me think like there may be something to that. So I'm going to zero it out, and does that look about right? Yeah. So I will say, I think I said this before, I found it very helpful to use a Sharpie to mark these tines or these feelers to distinguish them from the pick body itself. And this comes into play especially later, hopefully, when we successfully pick this or impression it, and we're actually trying to do a reading of the levels, or the depths, I should say, because it's very hard to see silver on silver. So I recommend, it was actually easiest to do this from here and then kind of like wrap the Sharpie around each one of them and do all 7 of them that way. Just a little tip. The other thing I'll say is they included an Allen wrench with this, and I strongly suspect that, well, all right. So I noticed in Bosnian Bill's video that this little rubber thing was not present. This little black rubber thing. This can probably be taken off. There is a little Allen's wrench screw thingy here, and I'll try to, yeah, that looks like it's focusing right here, and so I suspect, I haven't even taken this out, I think I saw something about this in one video, but basically what I could do, see when I zero this out, it's zeroed now. These are still like a little on the high side. Like there's a gap here. See this little gap here? So what I think I could do, if I was so inclined, is basically use this, loosen this thing up, move it up so that this thing, I don't even know what to call it, this moves up to here, and then it'll be even easier to zero up because these tines or these feelers will actually butt up right against the new location of this. I'm not doing it because this is all new to me, and I don't have the confidence to screw with it yet. I could actually do it with the 8. Maybe I will at the end. Let's see how long this thing runs. Already at 25 minutes. But basically, I strongly suspect that that could be an improvement, and that's what this is for. But I'm not going to muck with it. This is already long enough as it is. So, all right. So this is zeroed out, and I am going to. All right. Let's get that little rubber thingy back up for what the heck it's worth. Just to look nice and pretty. All right. So now I'm going to tighten it like what I would call 95%. So tighten it. Pretty much. I think that's pretty tight, reasonably tight. Could be tighter, but not by a lot. All right, so hopefully, let's see, I gotta find my little arrow, and I hope to God this works because I want to move on to the next phase of the video. So I'm gonna push all the way back. Come on. And then, you know, it's not actually working. Let me try the, all right. That is way too many times. So that is not, so I'm thinking either I didn't push it all the way back or, yeah, all right, well, we learned pretty much almost as much from failure as we do from success. So I'm going to loosen it up. Tight. Okay. Those all look good. There it is. Got it. Finally. All right. So now, thank God, because I was about ready to call this video dead. All right, so now the idea is each of these have been raised to the right level. Each of these pins or tines have been raised to the right level. So now I do agree with all the other videos which say this is the time to tighten this up as far as it can go, because we're going to be using this to, now what I will say is test it again, because at this point you shouldn't be afraid it's going to move. So test it again. All right. Works good. So now what we have is we have basically a temporary working key. So this justifies all the waiting, and I'm going to try to speed up some of those failed attempts. I didn't want to have to edit this video, but might have to for the sake of sanity. All right, so the idea is, well, all right, I will say what I've done is I have ordered a second, you know, I want to be careful how I put this. I have ordered a second key gauge, but what they sent me with the Southord one was this. And you can see it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's an 8, but there's nothing in the 8, so I don't know what the heck that's for. Maybe that's, I don't know. So these are depths. These are like a quick set card. So 1 is the shallowest, and then 2, you know, you can go all the way up to 7, which is the deepest. So there are gauges which look more like Lego pieces, where you actually, they give you a very short one, and then what you do is you basically try to stick it into the hole. So basically you'd stick the Lego piece here and see which one fits perfectly, and then you say, oh, this is a 7 or a 6 or whatever. So I ordered one of those because to me that's a lot easier to use than this gauge. This gauge is I'm not really a big fan of it. Basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out which level matches exactly. So when you're doing the decoding for these keys, you start at, so you find the notch and then you go around clockwise. So this is 7 pins, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you start at the 1 o'clock position and you go around. So basically what you would do with this decoder is you want to find the one where this dip or this depression matches. So this depression matches the same level as you're trying to get the number for. So I'm testing a 4, and it looks like that 4 is still a little gap. So it's basically the 4 is too shallow for that particular pin. So I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to go to 5. 5 looks slightly too shallow. It's not the top of this thing, which I'm looking at either one of these, it comes a little short of the top of the key. So I'm trying to get to basically that space should match the key entirely. So then I go to 6, and that looks right on. That looks like it perfectly encapsulates. So the first position is a 6 in this key. So the idea is, let's pretend I don't have this key. Bye key, see you later. But I do have this, and this is a temporary key. We just tested it, we saw that it works. So now that I basically have a temporary key and I've locked it the F down by tightening that all the frickin' way, now it's the same principle. So the notch, and then you go around, and so we're actually going to do this. So we are going to check this and check for sanity and basically see if we understand what the heck is going on. So this is where putting the black mark with the Sharpie at the edge of the tines really helps, because like I said, trying to view silver on silver, not that helpful. And this is also with the Lego piece is a much better gauge, because with the Lego piece you just stick it in and see where it stops. Whereas this, you're trying to match a shape, and it's just, I can't wait for the Lego gauge to arrive. I'm calling it Lego gauge, whatever. Well, we already know what this one is because we just did the key, but we'll pretend that we don't. So 2 is way too short, 4 is way too short. All right, so this is the notch there. So I'm trying to do the first one. So 4, so what I'm trying to go right to the bottom. 5 is a little too short. 6 looks perfect. So I'm gonna write down a 6. 6. Bad handwriting. 6. Now we're gonna go around. So 6 and all right, we know it's shorter than a 6. I'm gonna say 4 looks slightly wrong. I'm gonna say a 3 is perfect. So 6, 3. And we're gonna have to do this 5 more times because it's 7 pins. So 6, 3, and that looks like it's the same level. Those two is, so 3, call it 6, 3, 3. And then, so let's see, start 6, 3, 3. That looks a little lower. Could be the same, but it looks a smidge lower. So 3 doesn't look right. 4 looks perfect. Yes. 6, 3, 3, 4. Okay, so we had, let's see, notch 6, 3, 3, 4. And then that looks like the shallowest. I would call that a 1. 6, 3, 3, 4, 1. And then now we're much deeper again. What the heck could this be? 4 is not quite it. I would call that a 5. I would definitely, is that a 5 or a 6? This is why I put it in black. That could actually be a 6. This is, again, the Lego piece gauge would be much better. I'm trying to, No, I'm gonna stick to 5. I think that's a 5. That would be my guess. I really do think that's a 5. One more to go. 5, and then that looks like a smidge lower, maybe. I think a 5 is too, and I'm gonna call that a 6. 6, 3, 3, 4, 1, 5, 6. Okay, now the truth is, well, you know what? For the sake, just for the fact that this is already too long, I have already measured the key. I won't make you watch. All right, you know what? I can't help myself. Let's just see if it makes sense. 6, 3, 3, 4, 1. I don't know, we'll call that maybe a 5 and a 6. I'm just curious what those last two are. Let's see. Not a 6. I like that 5. And the last one. Ooh, that last one. I don't know if that's a 5 or a 6. No, maybe a 6. All right, so rather than make you watch me decode the key, let's just see what it really is. So I have 6, 3, 3, 4, 1, 5, 5. So I was 1 off. Well, if I cut the key base out and it didn't work, I would then basically, having left this the way it is, I'd go back and I'd recheck and I'd say which ones was I not sure about. So and you could see that I was not sure about it. So let's see, we need to go, all right, the last one. Those do look visually, those two, I don't know if you can see, and those two do look like they're kind of the same level. So it would not surprise me. Maybe a hair less, but I don't know. Let's see. Let's check in if the 5. Again, I will feel more confident when I get the Lego gauge. And see, it does look like a 5 now, but maybe. It's very hard to tell. You know, I could say it could go either way, but so basically, if I cut this 6, 3, 3, 4, 1, 5, 6, and it didn't work, what I would say is, well, I know this works. I'm going to go back and recheck those levels and see which ones I was unsure about. And maybe I'd say, you know, that last one, I couldn't really tell if it was a 5 or 6. Let me try a 5, then try that key out, and it would work because, I mean, I know what it's based off of, so, oops. All right, that was a very long video, and the whole reason that I did that was to cement or record all of the knowledge that I gained from screwing around with this for the last week and a half before the knowledge drains from my brain, because it could actually be another 2-3 weeks or so before I go over back where the washer and dryer are located and play around with this. So yeah, anyway, that's my video. I hope it's useful to some. I sort of wish that a video like this was around when I was trying to do it, because I love Bosnian Bill. He's awesome. I learn a ton from his videos. But in that particular case where he said, tighten this thing up till it starts to get tight and then a nudge more, that didn't work for me. And I think the reason is that his springs in the lock that he was picking happened to be medium strength, maybe even slightly weak, whereas my springs on this lock, which is a brand new lock, are actually fairly strong, and that's why I had to use very tight tension. And the giveaway was that when I pushed this all the way back, these feelers or these tines were getting all pushed down to like what I was calling like a 9 or a, you know, all the way. They were all getting flushed down the same level because there wasn't enough tightness or friction here to provide enough resistance for this thing to do the impressioning. So that was the giveaway, was when I pushed it in and these were all getting all the way back down here, that's a dead giveaway that this is not tight enough. You're not providing enough restriction or friction, and like in the book where they had a ton of rubber bands to provide more friction, same idea. So yeah, basically what you want to see is you want this to be tight enough that when you push it in, you see these things going at different levels, because that means that there's kind of enough friction for it to be do the impressioning. So anyway, that's all I have. I guess I will have to edit this video to try to speed up some of those failed attempts. And all right, thank you very much, and I will see you online. Thanks. Bye.